trickle in. So those of you who managed to find our room over here have solved the most difficult part of Casual Connect.
Yes.
Thanks so much for joining us. This is our last session for the indie games track, and there has been one recurring theme that's come up time and time again in many of the talks, which is basically how you survive as an indie game developer in the increasingly competitive world where pretty much anyone can self-publish, as well as publishers competing in the same space that indies are competing. Ensuring that you can keep your studio running and do what you love is a huge challenge. And here we have some of the successful indie game studios who have been there and seen through this challenge, here to talk about their experience. So I will be filling in as moderator, but we're going to make this really an open Q&A. Hopefully you guys can also ask each other questions and turn it into a bit of a conversation. And starting from there, just go ahead and introduce yourself.
Cool. Hey guys, I'm Dave Edery. I'm the co-founder of Spry Fox. We've made games like Steambirds, Triple Town. We co-developed Realm of the Mad God before, and then sold it to Kabam. Bunny, and then we recently launched 2 games called High Grounds and Leap Day. And we've been in business since early 2010, I think, and we're bootstrapped. We haven't raised any money, and we have one deal that we did with a publisher, but that was for a game that we'd already fully self-developed. So for the most part, we're totally bootstrapped.
My name is Wade TINNEY. I'm one of the co-founders of a studio called Large Animal Games based in New York City. We've been around since 2001 and done pretty much every kind of deal that the game industry has to offer. So from work for hire to publishing deals to co-publishing deals to self-publishing.
Some you can't talk about?
Some we can't talk about, just backroom, late nights. Most recent game that I'm very excited about is a game called Colors End, which you should all immediately download for iOS or Android. And yeah, I'll turn it over to Brian.
I'm Brian MASHINTER. I am the producer at Backflip Studios. We've been around since 2009. We were also bootstrapped until about 20 days ago or so. So it's weird being on this and not being independent anymore, but we can talk about what that means later.
Cool. And for those who weren't here earlier, I'm Mike Sego. I was previously the CEO of Gaia Online, and before that I started a social game called Fluff Friends. I am not Juan. I'm filling in. He unfortunately wasn't able to make it today, so but I'll respond to Juan if needed. So I think one of the major topics of the day is this whole question around whether you can or should self-publish, or whether you should look for a publisher to get you through those squeaky times in starting a studio. And what's your thoughts or approach on that?
I'll go first. What I typically tell people is I don't think there's a blanket answer to that question. I think it depends largely on your level of interest in and tolerance for the business side of this, right? So like what in particular, it depends on in part in kind of game you're making. Let's say you've decided that you want to make a free-to-play game on mobile. Let's just pick that as a random example. Like, okay, that's fine. Are you are you a company that's nothing but designers, artists, and engineers, none of whom have any interest in business? Okay, then you might struggle a little bit, because it turns out that making a fun game just isn't enough. There's a lot that goes into the analytics side of it and the marketing side of it and so on and so forth to make these games successful. And if you don't want to have anything to do with that, if you're the kind of person, which is totally legitimate, by the way, I don't say this with any amount of disrespect. If you're the kind of company that's like, I just want to make fun games, then cool, make fun games, but find an adult to help you with the business side of making fun games. And and that means oftentimes a publisher. If on the other hand, you're a company that wants to make fun games but also is really eager to control its own destiny and understand the business side, which takes years. I mean, it doesn't happen overnight. We've been in business for 3 years and we still fuck up daily. So, like, if you're willing to make the substantial investment into understanding the business side of it and really developing expertise in things like, like marketing, like PR, like community management, event management, all that stuff, then okay, then maybe self-publishing is a really good route for you that will enable you to, you know, control your own destiny going forward in a way that people who rely on publishers can't. But it really just depends on the company. I mean, I wouldn't just tell someone, oh, because you can control your own destiny when you run, you know, when you do everything yourself, you should self-publish. Like, know thyself. Like, if you're the kind of company that where everyone in the company cringes at the mere thought of looking at a spreadsheet, like, you should probably have a publisher.
Yeah, just to add to that, I would say, don't self-publish until you understand exactly what it is publishers do at a very detailed level. And one good way to understand exactly what publishers do is to work with a publisher. So if you do, I think working with a publisher is a great stepping stone to self-publishing, and I would approach it like a lesson in what publishers do.
A lesson that costs you 50%, give or take, of your revenue.
Yeah.
Basically. Which is
Right.
fine, which may be a
Yeah.
worthwhile fee to pay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is true, though, that, I mean, we've self-published games that sold, I'm not sure how big my extended family is, but maybe that number plus 2 or 3.
They weren't very viral.
Yeah, they just, it was very incestuous. But yeah, I mean, it's true that it's much better to get 50% of a much bigger pie. You know, the publishers will always tell you that, and it is totally true. The math works. So I think we wouldn't have been able to successfully self-publish unless we had done all of those deals and worked with lots of different publishers and had bad experiences and good experiences. So one way or another, you have to get that experience.
Yeah, I think what you were saying, know thyself, I think it's also know thy target. I think you need to know, like, if you want it to be just your extended family and you want, you know, if you want
Yeah.
it to be small and you want it to be this intimate thing, then maybe self-publishing is absolutely the way to go. Or you can do what we did, which was get lucky. I highly recommend it. Be as lucky as possible. You know, we just had the advantage of being in the iOS market early with Paper Toss. And so we were there early, and so we were one of like the 11 teen apps to download.
Yeah.
So that worked out for us. So that helped us build a network which allows us to self-publish because we can self-promote. Right, so we have a huge network of users. They see ads in our games, and I say, oh, you love Ninjump. How do you feel about dragons? And so that allows us to be kind of self-sustaining. So we just happened to be lucky and early,
Yep.
And that became a self-sustaining model for us.
Yeah.
Cool. So, you know, the other side of surviving is just ensuring you don't run out of money. And one of the best ways to not run out of money is to not spend money. So on the whole topic of running lean and doing more with less and ensuring you're being as cost effective as you can with your indie studio, what are some of the main ideas, top tips and tricks?
I'm going to go first if I can. Just to be a total ass, the supposition that it's always spend little to do a lot. I think there's also the adage it takes money to make money. I think you have to be willing to spend and make some bets. I remember during before Dragon Veil had come out, and we were spending too much time and energy on our art. And as the producer was starting to do this, I was starting to freak out. We were going to miss deadlines. We were going to fail. And I remember going to my CEO and saying, hey, I'm a little worried about the cost. I'm a little worried about what we're putting in. And he was like, no, fuck that. If we're going to bet, we're going to bet big. And I'm not going to hear somebody say we didn't succeed because we didn't put our best foot forward. Fuck that. We're going to spend the money on the art. So I think you're right. You have to be smart about it. But you also, I think, from an independent perspective, I think you also have to kind of go all in sometimes.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think the other thing, this is total obvious thing to say, but something we kind of screwed up, which was having a financial controller. I mean, it's just, that is a skill that I think a lot of developers don't incorporate into the structure of the company early enough, and we just kind of stumbled into that skill set with one of our team. Hey, there's one.
Hey, buddy.
But that was critical for us. So have someone can focus on that. And again, so you can focus on making the great product,
Yep.
right? But someone should just be minding the cash flow.
Hire your weakness, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I think the other thing that we did, I think a lot of developers have a DIY mentality and are too reticent to work with other people's technology. I mean, obviously you have to be super careful about working with other engines or platforms or analytics tools or whatever it may be, but if you are careful and have a process for evaluation, you can save yourself a ton of time and headache. So we have always rolled our own tools, and you can just keep investing and investing and investing in that. And so once it's done, it's great. You have another piece of IP and another piece of value that is part of your company. But looking back, it probably would have been better to just focus on getting a product into the market quicker.
And I think that's one of the key things. As a small company, and this is not just something that it's common in a game development environment, but also in any, these are one of the key lessons of management, you need to be able to leverage into other things. If you are trying to build everything from scratch, then you have problems maintaining that in the future. So you have to be clever in what kind of partnerships can I have in order for me to get what my core competency is, which is game development, right? Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. I'm sorry I'm late. It was a family emergency, and that's the problem of having a conference in the same city that you live in. They can get you. So I'm back. My name is GRIL. I'm studio manager at JoJo Games. And the idea for this panel was to bring people who have been pretty successful in terms of managing their own studios and surviving in this really tough ecosystem. So what do you guys think is are the biggest challenges for us right now in terms of being successful as a small company and a studio?
Getting people to play your game.
Which is always a problem. Just sometimes it feels hard, nastier than others. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's pretty much the
It's
perennial
discovery and just acquiring players, getting in front of players. I mean, you can make great games, but if you don't solve that problem one way or the other, then
I'll throw in an additional thing, which is it used to be that if you could solve that, that's always been a problem, but if you could solve that problem, it used to be that you were generally okay. Nowadays, what you oftentimes see happening is an indie gets lucky, solves the problem, but then screws up the monetization in their game and doesn't actually make any money. So they reach 10 million people, but they make a few $1,000s, and they're like, oh, that sucks.
Yeah.
And so I think those are the two things right now. And of course, this issue is compounded by the fact that right now, certain ecosystems like mobile in particular, are just ultra hot. And so you see devs out there who are literally willing to spend $3, $4, $5, $6, $7 for a single install with no guarantee that install
It's
will be
ridiculous.
to them. Because they have games that are just either they're VC backed and they're just burning cash left and right trying to acquire customers at any price, and or B, they have a game that's so profoundly well tuned that they can actually make those acquisitions affordable. Like if you look at a game like Puzzle and Dragon, they're making $3.5 million a day. Their ARPU must be pretty high. Like they can probably spend a fair amount on user acquisition and not have it be a loss. So so that ends up being a big challenge, and the way we've tried to solve for it since day one has been try to make something unusual and different, and then try to get the platform to feature it. Because we decided a long time ago that we wouldn't be. We would like to be the kind of company that makes the kind of game like Candy Crush or Puzzle and Dragon that can make insane amounts of money, and maybe we will at some point. We're going to keep working towards that, but we tend to optimize on what's the most fun, quirky thing we can make, and not necessarily what can make the absolute maximum amount of money. And lately, it has been feeling like you have to do the latter to have any chance of competing in the market, unless you have some help. So we focus on building things that are worthy of having some help, if that makes sense.
And those type of things also are likely to get the most word of mouth.
Yep.
Which is really powerful.
Well, I think Spryfox in general is a really good example of, you guys do so much, but you're also willing to put the effort in, right? You killed 9 games before you put one out. I think you guys do a really good job of cultivating that creativity. I was trying to explain High Grounds to somebody yesterday, and I'm like, so it's like a deck building combat strategy thing. But I think you're right. I mean, I think doing something different, something that people haven't seen, or doing something really, really well tuned. I think those are kind of your major options there.
Yep. I mean, yeah, I'm sure there's a middle ground, but I haven't seen it. It seems like the people who are winning today are either making something totally original or just copying something else that's been really successful and doing it 20% better. And there's not a lot of in between in the market right now.
Or paying for mountains of users, right?
Right.
I mean, that's.
But it's usually
is
hard
that-
to do that if you're not copying something that has pretty good metrics.
Correct.
Yeah,
Or
which is-
VC.
Yeah, or VC, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge problem of us understanding which game is successful or not, because today we have a lot of games in the top 50, top grossing chart in the first 50 positions, and they're not necessarily are games that actually make money. We have a lot of games that are pushed by publishers in order to get them a certain positioning. So in order to evaluate what games are successful or not, it's not just about the positioning in the top grossing chart. It's also how long that title sustains itself in the top grossing chart. You know, it's not just about reaching #1 position. It's about, can you maintain yourself inside the top 50 for 6 months? And that's what you know if the title is successful or not.
Yeah.
Yes, I can.
And in terms of your companies, do you see that because of the ecosystem of actually releasing a game and maintaining it monthly, how does your management or your management of teams change since we've been doing free-to-play games or games where we provide a game as a service almost?
I think one of the most important things for people who are used to doing traditional games where it's like you work really hard and then you release and you have a big party and then everyone relaxes for a few weeks, and if you work for the wrong company there's a big layoff too. Like, I think for those people who haven't moved into this new space yet, the biggest lesson is simply that you have to pace to sustain, right? It's a marathon, not a sprint, which is a very tired expression that actually fits very well in this situation. Like, you're going to be working on this game if it's successful for years, and you're never going to get a break. Every 2 to 4 weeks, your customers, give or take, are going to expect an update, right?
Oh, man.
And they're going to bitch. I mean, we have customers who now expect them, because on High Grounds, and particularly since you mentioned that one, on High Grounds lately we've been updating like 2 or 3 times a week just because we're in this weird zone where we're changing a lot of little things. And after doing that for about 3 weeks, our users have now come to expect it, and they bitch if they don't get an update every week. Like, you know, and we'll get them back to expecting a more reasonable one every 2 or 3 weeks. But I mean, that goes to show, right? Like, if your expectation is I'm going to crunch and then I'm going to release, then you'll be crunching forever. So you have to get out of that. And we try really hard. Like, we basically have a policy that people aren't allowed to work on weekends. Some of our guys break the rules every once in a while, but usually it's to work on their own thing, so that's fine. We don't let people work on weekends. We encourage people to try to keep their hours below 45, 50 as much as possible in general. And we do that on purpose because in the times where we haven't done that, we've all ended up burned out.
And the quality goes down. So. Yeah, absolutely. Wait.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to take a different approach, I mean, we've talked about, as we move to a live services model where we know we're going to be releasing updates. First, we started doing that on Facebook.
Right.
Now that we're focused on mobile, we're doing it on mobile with updates. We've always talked about, like, switching out the team that built the game for, like, a live services team that is really focused on analytics and that type of thing. But we've never actually been able to pull the trigger on it because at the end of the day, the team that built the game knows the game the best. So really, we're usually, it's the team that was with the game at launch plus customer service and marketing people.
Yeah.
Or a marketing person, a part of a marketing person.
Right.
Like a hand and an ear.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
It's always the ear.
So it took us, we made the transition from the kind of packaged goods model to the live services model in the Facebook world, and it was super painful. I mean, it took us, I would say, really like 2 years to fully get our heads around that, to switch to, 1 week, we run an agile studio, so to switch to 1 week sprints, to get people in that, get people thinking about data as a way to have insight into player behavior and caring about that and interpreting it in the right way. Get people, adjust our tools so that we could release content into a game without involving engineers every single time. So just, and really just a cultural shift.
And for you guys too, right, Brian? I mean, you guys were console when you started Backflip. Did you
No,
start?
it's always been mobile, but we were definitely the fire and forget a little bit.
Gotcha.
And we would update occasionally with like level packs to Ragdoll Blast
Right.
or something like that. But it was less. I mean, like Dave was saying, I mean, the expectations on Dragonville right now, or do you have the people bitching that it's too much content yet when you were doing 2 or 3 a week?
Oh, yeah, we had that too.
Yeah, that was like, oh, too many dragons. And you're like, but anyway. So for us, I think the big transition is the team actually got bigger when we went live.
Yeah.
And we kind of have a hybrid approach where we did roll off engineers and designers and then roll new guys on. So we have kind of like the launch team and the live team,
Yeah.
but key people stick around.
Yeah.
So the main artist is still the main artist, Tom
Yeah.
Olson, who's a genius. Thank God he's still there, and still,
Yeah.
he's still kind of managing the dragons.
Yeah.
And so that we kind of went with a hybrid approach. And the team now, we actually did a stand up about 3 weeks ago, and I looked at the room and I realized that the team for Dragonvale is the size Backflip was the day I started a couple of years prior. And so that was an interesting thing for us, and it was almost like victims of your own success. We weren't ready
Yeah.
for the pace.
Yeah.
And so now it's just it feels like changing the wheel on a moving vehicle sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's super exciting, and it's nice to be able to have a community that you can interact with and hear back from and make those kind of changes. So
Yeah.
game as a service has been a transition, but a fun one.
Yeah, I definitely want to get to that hybrid approach.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think like starting to move key people off, but whoever is maintaining the vision stays within each discipline.
Yeah, and for us, it was kind of making sure they wanted to be there.
Yeah.
Right? Are you ready? You're passionate,
Right.
you're
Yeah.
excited about it. Will you actually let this baby go?
Sure.
Or not? That was part of it.
Yeah. I mean, some people are better at starting new things, and some people are better at like finishing.
Yeah,
Right?
we call them ones and twos.
Yeah.
In our engineering department, there's the ones and the twos. The crazy, creative genius guy who's going to write something that's super flawed and buggy,
Yeah.
and then the guy who's going to come in and make that thing hum.
Yeah.
And occasionally you catch a 1.5,
Yeah.
and that's the guy you hold on to forever,
Yeah.
if you can.
Yeah. By the way, how big is the Dragonvale team that was the same size as?
It is currently 15 people.
Okay.
That's great. I think for me the biggest challenge is to actually maintain a game live. We need to start thinking as an enterprise software developer instead of a bunch of game hackers, because it really is. Even in the console space, I feel that because of the fact that there was a gold master, as long as it was working and it could be shippable, there were a lot of things in terms of the software architecture that wasn't properly planned. Whereas now, because of the fact that you have a game live, and you also probably have your game running on multiple platforms, and progress is carried out from platform to platform, and there are 2 ad networks, a multiplayer backend, and X amount of services that need to interact with your game. There's a responsibility in terms of software development and architecture that it didn't exist in my studio. And we need to change how we develop software and how we plan the development of software. And that was a real cultural change for us.
Going back to your question about the biggest challenge,
Yes.
the other thing that occurred to me is just like choosing the launch point. Because, that comes up all the time because there's you can always think of some other thing or feature or ad network or whatever it is
Yeah.
that might help you be more successful at launch.
Yeah.
And convince yourself that, well, if we don't have that in, like if we don't have the perfect social features in,
Right.
then we're going to miss all the virality that might come with any promotion. If
Right.
we don't have the perfect ad networks in, then, but it's also pushing out the launch. It's increasing the hole that you have to dig yourself out of. And so that's we spend a lot of time wrestling with that on every title, and particularly with self-published titles. I think that we've made the mistake of spending like 10 times more calendar time on a game than we really should have.
So we don't struggle with that at all, and I would love to talk about it. So, but it's not because I'm sure it's because we're not more insightful than you, and it's literally just because we've basically taken some of the importance out of launch by choosing incremental launch platforms that we use to lead up to the ones that we really care about. So
Right.
in other words, like with High Grounds, for example, like first we launched it on our website, where the stakes are super low. Like, oh no,
Right.
it didn't do well on our website. Well, we burned 100 people, and then and then it goes from
Yeah.
up there to
And Wade's family.
right.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
That's right.
They're,
all
they're
super-
available for beta testing.
That's what I was going to say. So I appreciate it.
So we start off our website,
They
and
get
then
paid in
maybe
Sour Patch Kids. They just love them. What can I say?
Well, they take
Nice.
Dragon Gems. Anyway.
So anyway, so we our website, and then maybe a little bit later we'll go on like Armor Games, and maybe a little bit later on Congregate.
Yeah.
And Congregate is starting to get big. Like at that point, we're a little bit more serious, but it's still incremental, right? Like Congregate is still not as big as Steam or iTunes or Google Play, right? And so
Yeah.
like by walking it up those levels, that it takes a lot of the pressure off, because if people internally are like, man, I really think this is ready to release, and some of us are disagreeing, well, fine, let's release it on the web to a few thousand people and see what happens.
Yeah.
And there's always this sort of latent fear, particularly for our company, that if we do that, the game is going to get copied. But we're just careful. Like in general, as soon as we see that the game has good enough metrics to justify being on a big platform, we put it on a big platform. If someone copies it before it has those metrics, they're not going to do well. So let them copy it. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, so we I don't know. It seems to work for us.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting approach.
For us, that conversation happens for us as well. Kind of, when do you launch something? How do you do that? Especially because you see generally when you look at the trends of downloads, right? There's that spike, and then the level off. However that looks, it just kind of depends on how viral it goes. And then if you're really lucky, it keeps going up into the right for a long time. So we found that most downloads, most buzz, most people are going to get it when it's new and fresh. And so it is a battle for us, because we're like, okay, if the social feature is wonky, does that really harm its virality when we're going to have the most exposure, and does that cause us problems?
Yeah.
So there's definitely some, because we don't have the Steam and the web, and we don't have those platforms as kind of like a ladder up. So we are a little bit more careful.
Yeah.
And one of the things that, it's kind of our culture in general, is we have big casual games, hopefully very successful casual games that then funnel towards kind of our higher yield stuff. So we try to coincide an update with Paper Toss or Ninjump or something like that a week before we're going to launch something.
Yeah.
Because then we're on people's minds, they're playing our game,
Yeah.
they're going to see something, and then we launch something right after that.
Yeah.
So we try as best we can to be very intelligent about our launch window, so it's casual game, yield game, so that we've kind of created this mountain of new users that we can hopefully funnel towards the thing that we think is going to do well.
Yeah.
Are you guys comfortable with the audience that let me rephrase the question. Have you guys reached a point where the new audience that you're getting, it's evening out with the audience that already finished playing your game? Do you feel comfortable with that, or are you still depending on your marketing budget in order to pay for CPIs?
We don't pay for a lot,
Okay.
and again, I think part of that comes just from being lucky, and so
Right.
we just and
You have
we've
a
done,
Or having a good game,
We have a
actually.
network. Good games are helpful, and
Right.
then we also we do swaps with other studios, right? Like
There you go.
we're not going to hide in a corner and be like, oh, it's our stuff, and we're never going to. No, we're happy to do that because we find good users that way. So
Do you guys
so sometimes it's
what do you
swaps.
guys use? Chartboost or something like that?
The amount of SDKs and APIs I have implemented in Dragonvale would take me the rest of the
Pretty
time
crazy.
to say.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of Chartboost. We do a bunch of different things, and we're always kind of trying and experimenting new things because
Okay.
for us, we want to spend the money. Instead of spending $250,000 a day on user acquisition, we'd rather spend that money on smart developers,
Right.
making good games,
Right.
and do that, and throw out 4 casual games, hope one of them is this awesome mega hit, and do that instead, because we'd rather, I'd rather make great games. Obviously, it's becoming more of a business, and you have to do that stuff, and we're lucky to have some of those real smart folks on staff, but for us, it's always been our model of make games and let that be the thing that funnels users.
So I just have to ask.
Yes.
Now that you work for the man,
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
do you think you'll still be able to do those swap deals?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't say officially because I have no clue. I have ignorance as a shield right now.
Yeah,
I don't know, but I don't believe that that's changed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're still, I know our whole business team is here, so maybe Sylvia should be up here talking. But yeah, I think we're still going to be able to do that stuff because they're essentially leaving us alone saying, hey, you're smart at that. Continue to be smart at that.
Yeah.
And in a year or so, could you please be smart with that with G.I. Joe or Transformers or something?
Sure.
That's great. That's great. How are you? How you feel? I mean, you guys, you guys did a lot of really bold things, like really coming up with really creative games in the past year and a half too. You also fought the man when they copied your game, and you have amassed a community of players. How you feel today? Do you think 2 years ago that you were going to be here?
I don't know. I mean, we're so bad at looking even 6 months ahead. Like, you know what I mean? Like we
Gotcha.
basically, the whole time we've been doing this, we've just been, our philosophy has been like, let's have 4 or 5 or, you know, even 6 things going on at the same time.
Yep.
And just pray to God that one of them does well. You know, and like that's literally been us from day
Grab
one.
seat of pants, begin flying.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
right.
like just have a bunch of random stuff and throw it at the wall and hope one thing sticks. And I think when we first realized we might have a chance was when it kind of happened at the same time. It was a combination of like Triple Towns, you know, launching on mobile and doing pretty well, and I
Yeah.
think and roughly rather no, but it doesn't make as much money as Dragon Ball, I can tell you that. But it does okay. It's funding the company. But at the same time,
And it's awesome.
it was actually, thank you. But Realm of the Mad God actually was what really made us, and that was actually 2 years ago. So Realm of the God is what really, I think, showed us that, okay, this company has a future, and yeah, I might actually be sitting up on a stage like this talking in 2 years from now. It was because that game had, like, it was weird and it was different, but it also had a really vibrant community that was willing to spend a lot of money, you know, a lot relative to what we've been used to, which was, you know, a few bucks in Triple Town. And we started seeing like learning what it takes to keep those people engaged and grow a really weird game and actually turn it into something that can be a sustainable business. And I think that was a real eye-opening moment for us where we were like, oh, okay, cool. This isn't just a bunch of, like, up until then it was just a bunch of, you know, guys trying to be clever in a room but not actually knowing if this stuff works. And okay, this stuff works. And you know, a lot of it came down to you know, just simple things like, oh yeah, that kind of a progression system really does help. Oh yeah, that kind of an event system really does help. Oh, updating on this kind of a regular basis really does help. There were a bunch of lessons that we kind of thought were important, but we weren't sure. Some of them, Realm of the Mad God showed us were important. Some of them, it showed us that it was, you know, weren't. Same with Triple Town. There was some stuff that we thought would be, like, perfect example, daily, you know, you've seen this in so many games. They give you a daily reward for coming back. And we put a bunch of time and effort into putting a nice daily reward system in Triple Town. On Facebook, did not move the needle at all. Like, literally did not move the needle at all. Nothing changed. And you're like, oh, well, that was interesting. Okay, well, now we've learned something, and we won't invest so much time into putting that in our games in the future. I mean, other games do, so maybe they've done it in a different way that moves the needle more than us, but whatever. So, I mean, that was the point, right? It was like each of those 2 games kind of gave us a bunch of information that we didn't previously have about what works and what doesn't, and has kind of helped us get to where we are today.
Cool.
But, you know, yeah, it was just experimentation. It was all just kind of like, maybe that'll work. Throw it up in the air.
Yeah.
And this is something that it's not necessarily talked often because we're an industry where we're very binary in terms of defining success. At least I have this feeling in the game industry. It's like either it's number 1 or you suck, right? And I've seen this over the course of many years. And there's one thing that the mobile platforms are bringing, or the digital platforms are bringing, is that there's a lot of people who are not number 1, not number 10, not number 20, they're number 100, and they're doing great. You guys
That should
have
be our
all over
motto.
the top.
We're not number 100, but we're doing okay.
Right. So you guys are doing great. You have critical acclaim games, and you don't necessarily are in number 1 position, and you're doing great. You want to talk a little bit about that?
I'm sure. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It's, you know, the market is big enough that you don't have to be in the top 100 to do well. But you have to be structured in such a way that you can still benefit. Like, we're a really lean company. We're 10 full-time guys, and then there's another 10 friends of ours who are outside of Sprite Fox who work with us on our game. So 20 people in total working on 6 projects concurrently. It gives you an idea of what the average team size is, right? And we don't feel like that holds us back at all. Like, the games we're making are fairly deep, fairly interesting. sometimes they take longer to make than we'd like because the teams are so small. So
Yeah.
it takes us 2 years to make something instead of 1. But I mean, in general, that's how we've been able to do it. And I mean, Tripletown by itself is essentially, because most of it, like we sold Realm, so we don't have a revenue stream from that anymore. So basically, Tripletown is paying for the company right now, all by itself. And the only reason it can do that is because it's not because it makes that much money. It doesn't make that much money. It's, you know, relative to other free-to-play games with its install base. It's purely because we're really, really small and really lean, and we don't screw around. Like when it comes to prototyping, for example, our prototyping teams are 1 engineer full-time and maybe a third of a designer and no artist. Like, and we'll do that for like 2 or 3 months, and then if the game proves that it's fun with like crappy open source art from the web or boxes and circles or whatever, then and only then do we start having an artist contribute, and maybe we might put a second engineer on it, and even then for like another several months, it's just that size of a team. You know what I mean? Like we keep super duper duper ultra lean, so that if I have to kill a game 6 months out, it's a very painless decision. It's like, oh, that didn't work out. Well, that's too bad. It cost me 7 man-months worth of time. Oh well, who cares?
Well, and it didn't. It's also we don't have that kind of console mentality. I don't see that in mobile where it's like staff up, destroy.
Right.
There's a lot less
Yeah.
of that, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Totally. In my case, I wholeheartedly agree with the prototyping approach. I mean, what we did was to incorporate another person who would work for the technical director, and this person either helps the teams with the architecture of the game or prototypes. So we always get 20 to 30 hours of prototyping a week, and we use it for anything. And we throw prototypes all the time, and it's like my designers always have a stash of ideas that the engineer who's prototyping stuff just prototypes, and that made a huge difference in our company, because now when we go pitch ideas, we always go with a prototype, and it didn't cost us anything.
Yeah.
You know,
It's super liberating.
yeah, it makes a huge difference when we have a conversation. I like to talk about you are is Large Animal 13 years old?
13, yeah.
13 years old.
Yeah.
So that makes
we're like
you
in that
probably
awkward
one of the
stage.
oldest indie game development studios in the world. You think about that?
I had not thought about that. But that's-
Yeah, it makes you pretty old too.
You know, it's
Yeah.
like, way to rub it in.
I am pretty fucking old.
No, I'm not trying to rub it in. All right.
So you're ancient.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Right, exactly. No, but
My
seriously-
40th birthday is in a week.
really, I would go to New York for that.
Yeah, you should come over.
All right.
Yeah, you're all
All right.
invited.
All right. How do you feel 13 years later?
I'm going to start weeping.
All right, go for it. I can
No,
help you.
it's, you know, I mean, I think one of the great things about being a self-funded independent game developer is that you're basically a serial entrepreneur, but just under one business name. So, you know, when we started out, we were a work-for-hire Flash and Shockwave game developer. Then we started making, you know, casual downloadable games for PC.
Mm-hmm.
We did that for a bunch of years. Then we went to Facebook, and you know, each of those is like a totally new
Thing.
set of challenges. I mean, happily, it's been by and large the same core group of people throughout,
Right.
And that's, I wouldn't want it any other way. But
How big is the studio now?
we're 23 right now, yeah, and at points we've been up to 35, but yeah, it there's always something new and challenging, and I think as soon as that stops, then it will start to feel like a long time.
Right.
But
Hopefully it doesn't stop.
hopefully it doesn't stop.
Let's hope it doesn't stop. Do we have any questions from the audience? I want to open the mic. Yes, over there.
You're here because you're successful at surviving. Could you share any things that may have happened that kind of killed you, like mistakes you made that almost killed the studio?
Oh man.
The question is mistakes we made that might have killed the studio.
Where to start?
I have one.
There's so many. I mean, it's
Right. No, I have one.
spending too
I'll
much
start-
on a game, getting too attached to a particular game idea.
That one right there. God, that kills so many companies.
Yeah, you know, not, like getting married to your idea, and like even though people are like, yeah, cool game, you know, like you're not really reading between the lines.
You get the same feedback 7 different times and refuse to change it.
Yeah,
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 I would
that's never
say,
happened.
yeah, I would say in my case, the most important thing has been not having a strong leadership. When I started my company, I could manage 1 to 2 teams, but as your company grows because of your business opportunities, you might start hiring leaders who are not really up to the task, and you can really screw up your company that way. And I think it's really key that you know your limitations and that you don't grow fast. You make sure that if you grow, you have these things in place so you can manage it all. You had another question, and I'll go back to you, Tim. Yeah.
My question was, how do you guys personally keep yourselves from getting burned out and just staying motivated after several years of doing the same thing?
Having a lot of different balls in the air.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah.
find that because more often than not, I mean, that's just the nature of this industry. It's hit driven, right? So even if you're shooting for a niche audience, it's still hit driven. So if you're putting all your eggs in one basket and you're working on that game for 2 years and then that game doesn't work out, it's like, wow, I just worked
Crushing.
for
Oh,
2
soul-crushing,
years and I have nothing to show for it. And it's soul crushing, right? But if you have 5 games going on at the same time, which again, we're just 20 people and we're doing that, like, okay, it really sucks when it didn't work out. Don't get me wrong. You still want to go cry in the bathtub for a while. But, like, then you go on and you work on the other 4 games that you hope will redeem it. So that has been really helpful for us. Because I'm particular, like, I'm a super competitive person. So every time one of our games doesn't work out, I take it really personally. And I know I shouldn't, and I can't help it. I do it anyway.
Notice
Yeah.
it went that way.
But I know. So, that's really... And
Right. But also, another thing that is also very important is that us as managers, we get to move between the games, but in some cases, the people in the team who actually work on just that one game, what you need to make sure as a culture is that if this is a successful game, it's not just because of the people in that team that made a successful game. It's because of fucking everybody in the company who play tested the game, who contributed on the game, and really, if we're successful in this game, it's because of all of us, not just the programmer and the artist who work on that game. And that makes a huge difference in the case of failure.
Yeah.
I think for us, it's kind of back to how we define success is hopefully people play, download, and like your game, and then you like making it. I think life's just too damn short to do something you hate for too long. I think that's one of the things that helps you not burn out. I know there's definitely times, especially I think we did the same thing where it was 5-6 projects and 15 people or 20 people, and that's a little chaos, and you have to. You just have to be smart. You have to know yourself and take a break. Know when it's okay to because my CTO Dale is I call him Lake Placid. He's just right here all day, every day. Like I've seen terrible things happen, and you barely a blip on the radar. And that guy he's like an anchor for me because I can get a little worked up and a little crazy and take it personally and whatever. And he's like, we are not curing cancer.
Yeah.
We are not like we're making games.
Yeah.
Like, oh, did you have a bad day at your video game job?
Yeah.
So right, like you just have to. I think there's local stress and there's global stress, right? And you just have to take a step back and go, oh yeah, I'm really frustrated that dragon thing, right? Like I had a very vehement argument about the nature of magic, and I was ready to just punch that dude. And why?
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, you just have to. I think you have to know yourself well enough to take a step back and go, right, got it.
You just reminded me of something I also think is really important, which is working with people like Lake Placid, right? If you can fill your company full of people who are reliable and chill and who you can trust and believe in, it makes such a ridiculous difference. Like, no matter how stressed I am, I always am capable of, and I'm very good at getting stressed out. I'm always capable of defusing myself because at the end of the day, I'm like, all right, this really sucks, but my guys are awesome and they'll figure this out. And the one and only time in our company's history where I haven't felt that way has been because we had someone on the team who wasn't really reliable and who couldn't be counted on to, figure things out. And, for the several months that it took to get that situation sorted, I was a miserable person. It makes an enormous difference. Like, I would much rather work with 3 people who are incredibly reliable than 7 people who are good at their jobs but not reliable, smart and whatever, but not necessarily reliable.
And actually, that is a great answer to your question about mistakes.
Oh yeah.
Biggest mistakes made is keeping people that are not a good fit.
Yeah.
And I think for really small companies, especially, I have to imagine that a lot of indie developers have a kind of familial culture to them. Probably the best ones do, but that also makes it hard. Because sometimes that person might be a good, like they're fun at the lunch table.
Right.
They're
They
funny.
can be a great human.
They're
Yeah.
good. They're a good human being. They're
You're a
just not
good human
colleague.
being.
Yeah.
I know your
Yeah.
kids. I like them. You're
Yeah.
bad.
It's
Yeah.
easy
Yeah,
when
that's
they're
a
an
that's
asshole,
a tough
right?
thing, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
always easy when they're an asshole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it takes both kinds. You were saying like Lake Placid, necessary. Julian is not that. Who's our CEO?
But he's still
and-
reliable, right?
Oh no, super reliable. But
Well,
I
CEOs
that-
should be total hotheads.
that-
I think we can all agree on that.
that dynamic personality though is because you got somebody who wants to just hyper competitive and wants to chomp at the bit all the time, and then
Yeah.
somebody going, well, like let's be smart about this.
Yeah.
I think it's having a really good dynamic, and ultimately reliability comes I think just from consistency, but also people being bought in.
Yeah.
Like I've that vehement argument about the nature of Magic. At the end of it, you know, we go back to my office and we laugh about something else, and I ask him about his kids. That same person, like he knows that our passion is for excellence, and
Yeah.
so you can deal with a bit of assholishness if you understand that, like you don't take it all personally and get all butthurt. You just realize that you're really trying to make a great thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you can keep that in mind, I think that really helps.
Yeah.
I actually,
Yeah.
it ties into the stakes actually. Can you talk a bit about mistakes you made around learning monetization? Because there's kind of a learning curve, especially for developers that don't know how to do free to play. Yeah, that was for you, Sparkler.
Yeah, that one's super hard to answer in a short.
Yeah,
I mean,
a lot there.
it's just there's so much. I mean, typically what most developers end up doing, for very good and obvious reason, is they're like, well, that game looks successful. I'm gonna copy their shit, you know, and tweak it by whatever. And that's what we did with Triple Town, right? I mean, Triple Town was like, okay, energy mechanics seem to be hot on Facebook. We'll
Yeah.
slap
Is it-
one in this game.
yeah.
And we'll do a few other things. And then you find out that, okay, context really matters, and in your game it doesn't work as well as you thought. Or maybe it doesn't work as well in their game, and you just didn't know that, which is actually super, super
Yeah.
common.
The Bejeweled example.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Right.
That's what I like to talk about. Like, we were copying Bejeweled Blitz specifically in terms of how we decided to monetize it, and only later did we find out that Bejeweled Blitz didn't actually make very much money per user. It just had a massive audience, so it
Yeah.
was making money in aggregate. So that's typically what indie developers do, and I think that's hard to avoid doing. I'm not sure what advice to give. I mean, basically what you have to do is you have to get beyond that and start to learn why it is that people spend money, and then apply those lessons, as opposed to simply copying what may or may not work in other games. And so we've started asking ourselves, why is it that people spend money? And there's a bunch of reasons. Is because they want to progress in the game more quickly, which is a pretty classic one that we're all pretty familiar with. They want to distinguish themselves socially, and okay, so there's a whole set of things around that. And then figuring out, like, and you know, there's 5 or 6 more, and then figuring out how do I take those things, and are any of those applicable to my game, and cool, and asking a deeper question, which is, like, it's not okay to just have one. Like, if I find out that this game that I'm making, if the only way I can think of making money in it is by enabling people to visually distinguish themselves from one another, this game is not going to make a lot of money. Period. End of story. Right? Like,
Unless your target audience is like 12-year-old girls.
yes, thank you. I should have. Yes, like, we don't make those kinds of games, but if we did, we might be very well off. But so for us, we have a rule, which is, can we think of 3 to 4, ideally 4, completely different vectors with which to monetize this game? And if we can, and if the answer is yes, and then we, you know, given all those other things I was talking about, okay, then yeah, we will continue to make this game. If we look at a game, we're like, this game is super fun, but as a free-to-play game, we can only think of this one way to make money off of it. Then we either make one of 2 decisions. We
Right.
either kill the game, or we decide to make it a premium game, which is actually what we did with Road Not Taken, the game that, it's a puzzle game that we'll be putting out soon. It's going to be a premium game, because we just couldn't think of a lot of ways to monetize it
Yeah.
free, and we love the game, and we didn't want to kill it, so we're making a premium game, even though as a company we don't typically do that.
Yeah, and I think that's, at the end of the day, like, the monetization has to be part and parcel of the game,
Yes.
of each particular game, right?
Yes.
And it's not like there's like these magic formulas and you just like sprinkle them into whatever game and they work. Which is, I think I was even under that impression at some point in the last 5 or 6 years, right? When we started thinking about free to play. But as David said, like, our most recent game, it's a level-based puzzle game. We started premium. We probably should have just gone free, but we're just selling level packs and skips. And that's the thing that made sense for that game. So at the end of the day, I think the most consistently applicable advice is just make a game that's really compelling, and imagine what someone who's totally into your game would want to be able to do to more fully enjoy and explore that game.
And at the same time, I think it's important. Sorry to interrupt, Brian. It's important to understand who your audience is, because they are accustomed to spend money in a certain way. So I'll give you an example. People who are playing saga type of games, they're accustomed to spend money.
What type?
Saga type, like Candy Crush Saga.
Oh,
or,
yeah, yeah, okay.
like any game with a warm up and lives, and you get in lives, and so they're accustomed already to pay money in a certain way. In the same way that we, when we were kids, we were accustomed to pay 25 cents for 3 lives. And we have to realize that, especially since we're small companies, it doesn't make sense for us to come up with a new form of monetization, but more to focus on the game design, looking at our target audience. And if your target audience is accustomed to play a single player game based on lives, then we should accustom ourselves to our to that format and not trying to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. If you can say we're making an X type game, whatever the X is, then you should absolutely do what the most successful games of X type do. But I'm just saying, if you're making something, if you're trying to make something new, then don't just take the top 10 games, figure out what they're doing, and then try to put it into your game.
Right.
So I think we're actually
You're
saying
a
the
good
same
point.
thing.
Yeah, we're saying the same thing.
That is the mistake that we made. So to answer your question is, one of our games, we just slapped some monetization at the end because it wasn't an intrinsic part of the design, because it was a sequel. So we tried to slap a monetization technique on a sequel, and so kind of like Juan was saying, they're used to playing the game a certain way, and now there's these new ways that they can spend money, and they don't give a shit. They didn't want to play that game, and we kind of slapped it in, and it wasn't an intrinsic part of the design. But where like Army of Darkness or Dragonvale, those types of things, there was a very obvious way for monetization, 2, 3, 4 ways for those kind of different types of players. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do is basically copy everything that Dave says and think of 3 or 4 ways to monetize that are interesting for different types of players. Like knowing the Bartle types, knowing your audience, knowing your niches, and knowing that target and go, okay, like my mom, she's a helper. She would love to give you $5 to help someone else.
Right.
She would never buy a hat. Couldn't care less about a hat, but she would give $5 to help her son or help somebody do something. So that's how you could monetize with your family. So it's knowing the types of people and how they think about monetization, I think, is super imperative.
Yeah,
I have a follow-up question on monetization. At what point do you decide to monetize through advertisements, and does that point differ for different kinds of games?
I mean, we've learned advertising is significant, but it kind of sucks. So the thing that we've done that's been the most successful for us is incentivized ads. So you only ever see an ad if you want to in order to get something, right? So in Colors In, which is our most recent game, you can either buy the 100 level pack or you can get the next 5 levels of that pack by watching a video ad. So if you're just playing through the game, you will never have an ad put in front of you. But if you don't want to pay, but you want to keep playing, then you can watch an ad and you keep playing. And so for us, that's the best. That's like just win all around.
Yeah, we feel the exact same way. In Tripletown Mobile, the only advertising you see is, aside from our we promote our own games, which we don't really consider advertising the same way. But in terms of just random advertising from some third party.
That's in-house versus network.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The only advertising of the more general type that you see is specifically, it's I want more turns right now. I'm not willing to wait for them to regenerate. I will watch an ad. I have chosen to do this, therefore I shouldn't get angry when I see the ad. That's the only context in which we want to do advertising. We have a game called Pandapod, which you can play on the web right now, where unfortunately that game we started ages ago. The only reason it's coming out now is because HTML5 is a nightmare to work with. But that's a separate story. Anyway,
Don't do it.
Yeah, don't do it. Don't do it.
Don't do it, HTML5.
Yeah,
No.
but
Ever.
anyway, so we
takeaway.
did it, but and so now we're putting out a
did
game
too,
3 years later than we should be, and that game was inspired heavily by Words with Friends. It has an original gameplay mechanic, but it's inspired. The business model is inspired by Words with Friends. Again, this was back when we were making fairly silly decisions about what business models to imitate. And so that game, unfortunately, is just not the kind of game that's easy to monetize. Words of Friends makes almost all of its money from advertising, right, as far as I know. And so that game, it breaks my heart. That game just shoves ads in your face after every few turns, and we're doing that because we have to, not because we want to. In any other context where I have like the slightest bit of choice, we're doing incentive-based.
Yeah.
Any questions on this side? Yep, go ahead.
So, with a really small team, how do you find, what do you use to divide up responsibility? Like, you know, you've got your artists and you've got your engineers, but who handles your user acquisition? Who handles like replying to people on the forums?
That was the answer.
Whoever
do
is
everything.
free and is into that.
Yeah.
I mean, we have we've also had dedicated people at different times, which is great, and it makes a big difference if someone can focus on that stuff. But I'd say there are people, and I would be one of them if I could spend more time doing it, who are just like find that fun and engaging to do, and so that's the most important thing. Maybe that person is your producer, right? I mean, in some cases, we've had game designers who are super into looking at analytics and interpreting them, and are coming to me with ideas for how to respond to them. So I think the most important thing is to try to match interests and passions to that particular need.
I mean, could not
match
agree more.
passions,
This-
hire your weakness.
Yeah.
You know, and then be ready to pick up everything that falls.
Yeah.
Like, right?
Yeah. Simple.
best you can.
We just boiled it down to 3 things you have to do to survive.
There you go.
That's a really small story I could tell that actually helped us a lot. Around 6 months ago, one of my producers decided to start his daily meeting telling the team one tidbit about the game. So, for example, he would go into the analytics and look at some specific number, and he would start the daily meeting with the programmers and the artists and everybody in the team and say, we did this, and because of this, we had this. Or something about the relationship with the client, in the case if it was a work for hire game. But that did drive a lot of initiatives in the team to look for more numbers, for more ideas, for more features. So the one key lesson that you learn once you decide that, yes, there are people under you that can actually do their job and you don't have to do everything, is that if you start communicating and you start a flow of communication internally in your company about what's going on in your game, then there might be new ideas coming up. So that's something that actually really helps. But to your point, that what is also important is you're a small company, user acquisition and marketing are extremely complex professions, and you need to look into how can you get help for that. And I don't know if you guys want to talk about that specifically, because I don't want to say that doing it yourself is the best of ideas. You can be successful, but you have to keep that in mind. Any other questions over here? Yes.
So you guys mentioned earlier, we were talking about like biggest mistakes that could have like killed your company, and you mentioned like loving your game too much. I was kind of wondering like.
That only kills your company if it's a bad game.
Right.
I mean, just to be clear,
Right.
great games you should love all day long.
I'm curious, like, how many chances can you give your game to like iterate and make it better before you have to say, like when you kill it?
That's a really tough.
Yeah, that's a super tough question to answer. It depends on the game, right? I mean, if you look at the game and you're like, okay, well, this currently sucks, but here are a bunch of viable ways to potentially improve it, and those not sorry to sound so businessy, but it's a question of opportunity cost, right? So like, if here's this game I have, and here are the things that I think are viable ways of improving it, and they'll take me X time. Okay, what could I do with that time if I was not improving this game? You know what I mean? And which one seems like a more promising use of my time? Yeah. That's the most cold-hearted way you can look at it, right? And if the answer is like improving this will take 6 months, and I think there's a 50% chance it'll make the game better, or in that 6 months I could make this whole new game and I'm more excited about it than make the whole new game, or not, right? It just depends on which way you're thinking thinking takes you. What you don't want to do is be like, without it in any way, shape, or form evaluating what the odds of success will be or how long it will take you to chase those odds, to just be like, fuck it, we're gonna make this game better no matter what. Like, that's not a good idea.
I think the big risk is death by 1,000 cuts, and particularly like thinking that, okay, the core game is what it is, and there are some people who are having fun with it, but if we like add this daily reward system, or we add this gifting system, or we add that, like, that's gonna make it financially successful. And we made that mistake with our first generation of Facebook games, of just thinking like, we're gonna add this feature from that game, or this feature from that game, and at the end of the day, like, if you will know if it's really resonating with people. Like, players will be so into something in that game that you will know, like, okay, we somewhere we've hit a vein, and we can build on that. But you just have to be really honest with yourself and really assess whether there's really deep engagement. And I think that's what we've learned is,
And
like,
you have to beware the sunk cost fallacy.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
That term is like magic. Everyone here should burn that term into their head. So sunk cost is sorry, go ahead.
Please. No, you are passionate. Go.
Oh, seriously, this has been so important for us because we break this rule all the time. The sunk cost, so it's the economic/psychology term, which is like the effort that you put into something that can't be recovered, or the cash investment or whatever, right? So like, you know, like you've spent 6 months making this game. Okay, that time's gone, right? You can't magically recover that time. But a lot of people don't think
But
that
one
way.
more month and it's going to be fine. And
Right,
you can get back the value of that year that you spent if you can just get the thing out the fucking door,
That's
right?
right.
That's the
or
that's
add
sunk
the one
cost.
more feature.
Yeah, that's right. No,
Yeah.
but this thing will make it fun. Right?
Yeah.
That's you have to beware that thing.
Yeah.
That gets people all the time. So the common non-game example of that is like people who buy a stock and then something happens and the stock drops 50%. And instead of rationally looking at the company and being like, well, crap, it fell for 50% for a good reason. It's because the CEO was plundering or whatever, right? Like,
Did you just point at me? You just did an over-the-shoulder point.
No, that was just
Dude,
wild.
are we are private? Let me just say that we're a private company. We're not traded.
Anyway, long story short is a lot of people won't sell the stock because they're like, oh, I spent so much money on this stock, I have to wait until it goes up. That's not a rational decision. That money's gone. The stock's been gone down by 50%. Now your sole decision should be, do I think it will go up again tomorrow, or should I take the 50% that's left and put it in a different stock? It's the same with a game. Like, it doesn't matter if you spent 5 years working on a game. Like, all that matters is if I put another month in it, what will I get out of that month versus some other thing that I could have put a month's worth of effort into. And if you don't force yourself to think like that, you will be screwed.
Now,
And-
that, just to be totally clear, that doesn't mean you should never try to improve
Oh, yeah.
a game.
Yeah.
What we've learned, and every game is different, is that the more radical, like, if you're going to invest in changes, you should probably invest in something that is a pretty big change. Like, little incremental changes here and there, that's where you get into death by 1,000 cuts
Yes.
scenario.
We're in the middle of that right now.
Yeah.
We have a game coming out with it's got some dwarves in it, hence my ridiculous beard. And because early in the project, I'm like, dwarf beard. Everybody joined me, and I'm the only one left. But we hit a spot 6 to 9 months. I honestly don't remember when it was because I've blocked it out. But where we had to radically change the game, and we knew that there was some fun there. We knew that fun existed, and there's a piece of it that resonated. But we just kept trying to slap shit on this faulty system, and we had to completely change it. And now, so that's the caveat, the asterisk is that we did at that one point go, this is going to be expensive, but we're going to fix this because we all really care about it, and that core thing is there. And so we're going to do that. And
But the core thing was there. That was
That's
the
right.
point. You were like, there is something here. I fundamentally believe that I can make this better. And, you know.
Right, and we'll see if I'm right.
Yeah, hopefully it was rational
if not, it will be a totally different conversation next year.
And on that note, thank you very much, gentlemen. We have to go, and we'll see you guys next year. Thank
Thanks
you.
for the questions.
Thank you.